Nathan, it's great to finally have you on here. Just so that people know that we've been introduced through Jen, and she's been very, very adamant about getting you on here and trying to connect us. And so uh, I thank you for her reaching out to both of us and getting us together and making this possible. I know you and I had a brief discussion prior to this, and I'm looking forward to hearing your journey in life and what you can share with the listeners. Let's just start with like who you are, and what are you doing today that you're passionate about?
Okay. Small question, like who you are.
It's
So I generally, people ask me what I do. I tell them I'm an integrative nutritionist and a holistic health coach. I'm an entrepreneur, and I have been since I was probably very young, right? Selling bubblegum in schools and stuff like that. And I got a master's degree in university. I studied philosophy and communications, and fell in love with philosophy at that time, and um, kind of the hybrid between Eastern and Western philosophy. And in 2008, because of the financial collapse, kind of pivoted away from that and back into the world of business. And I had a buddy that was my high school best friend, was living in New Zealand, and invited me to come out and check out New Zealand. And he had an idea for some wellness clinics. And so ended up going out there in 2013 and started a franchise of wellness clinics. And that's kind of where one chapter ended, and another one started. And yeah, that was an amazing experience. We went from one tiny little wellness clinic in a section of Auckland, New Zealand, called Ponsonby, and we expanded into 8 different clinics and had a lot of success quickly in the business. And that's also kind of where another part of my story and journey started, which is, sometimes in life, when we get success, when we're not really, let's say, fully ready for it. I started drinking, and a lot of the behavior and activities that you do when you're at college, you kind of leave it at that time. And at that part in my life, we started partying and doing all that stuff again. And yeah, that's kind of where things went down a bit of a dark alley, let's say. And used meditation and personal development and nutrition as a different modalities for healing for my own personal self. And that's kind of when these things became a real passion for me. And at some point in time, it turned from something that I was using to healing myself into my passion project. And then it turned into a business. And that's what I do now. I do coaching with people one-on-one, group coaching, and then we run a nutrition company. And yeah, that's where I am. That's where I am today. So I do that as kind of professionally. And then my other real passion in life is for kind of teaching communication and leadership. It's with an ontological, phenomenological approach to leadership and communication. And that's how I know Jen, who introduced us. I've been coaching with a company called Landmark for about 10 years or so. And they teach a very kind of experiential approach to leadership and communication. So it's not about learning strategies and learning more about things. It's kind of at the level of being, learning these different approaches. So that's my whole life, and who I am in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, yeah. It was a big nutshell, but so you said the collapse of the philosophy. There was a collapse, I guess, with the 2008, and you stopped doing the philosophy. How did that relate with the collapse?
So no, the collapse was in 2008. There was a financial collapse. So I was in a PhD program in philosophy at that time, and I was studying a guy named Heidegger, who I loved. I loved what I was doing, but not enough to take on. When the financial collapse happened in the U.S., they took away all the funding from everything that wasn't essentially a STEM curriculum. And so I had to make a decision at that time whether I wanted to continue in graduate school and take on more debt, right?
Right.
Because usually when you're in graduate school, they pay, they pay for at least your pittance, right? They pay for your schooling, and then all of that got taken away. And I just took that as kind of a sign from the universe that it was time to pivot and do something else.
Gotcha. And then so you started the clinics, right, in New Zealand. And so I mean, did New Zealand really need the clinics back then?
Well, New Zealand's very small. I don't know how much you know about New Zealand. It's a very there's only 4 million people in the entire country.
Okay.
And we were actually just kind of looking at different places in the world where health was already kind of a high priority. And we'd also love to live there, be there, right? And New
Yeah.
Zealand's definitely both of those things. But there weren't a lot of, this was what, 2013. This is, however long ago that is. A lot of these kind of approaches to health and wellness have become more popular. They weren't back then. You had naturopaths and people that were doing that kind of thing, but we were the only wellness clinic that I can remember in New Zealand. So there was definitely a need for it at that time, but it was more like, how can we do what we love doing in a place that we love doing it?
Yeah, and it sounded like you did exactly just that. And so then you were getting really good and you were making money. Is that what led you to drinking and stuff, living the high life, as you probably put it?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. And because the businesses were growing, but one thing they don't teach you in school is there's no really school for entrepreneurship, right? So at that time, we're like, okay, if we grow the business, then everything will just get better. And the reality is, as an entrepreneur, if you expand too quickly, what happens is your business expands, your business grows, but it also means your overheads grow. We had a service-based business, so it meant more employees, more locations, more overheads, so more outgoings, right? And when you have a service-based business like that, it's hard enough to be like a single, whether you're a nutritionist or a personal trainer, like those things are already hard enough. But in the wellness industry, when you're paying employees and things like that, there's, at least in my experience, there was very little left over. So we were winning Westpac awards, which would be similar to like a Bank of America award, and winning business awards, but I was not making any money at that time. And so that probably had, quite a bit to do with it. Was, from an exterior standpoint, everything looked like it was going great, but I was, spending the night on other people's couches, eating beans out of cans. Like it was pretty intense, the kind of dichotomy between party going and then feeling like a kind of inauthentic, and like I was a bit of a fraud in that sense. And I don't think I just didn't handle that well.
Yeah. And that's what led you to drinking and going down the wrong path.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was younger, I already had that kind of propensity, but it was more in the service of having a good time. But that habit was there. And then when the stress came, it was like that habit was like, I already had a strategy for dealing with that. And for people that have ever dealt with any kind of addiction or whatever, the thing that's very powerful and challenging about addiction is, whatever your substance is, it works, right? It's something that's very effective at taking away the root cause, which is usually pain, stress, things like that. It works until it doesn't, until it makes the pain worse, and then you get kind of caught in that loop. So I kind of had that strategy that was there for having fun and like that, and then it just kind of shifted, and then it became pathological. When you're using it medicinally, it becomes a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've had some other guests too with addiction and stuff, and they shared how they got through everything. And yeah, alcohol, whatever it is, like you said, it's just replacing it for the moment, and then you just get right back into it. So then after that, you what was it again? You went back, you stopped doing the clinics, and then you started to do, what I got here? I got medicine or
online I mean, but basically online.
Yeah.
We had when we were in New Zealand, everything was in person, right? So we had clinics, we had 8 different clinics, lots of employees. When I got into personal development and I got into coaching, and then I got into the world of nutrition, a lot of those things don't require having physical locations. So I had actually pivoted to doing almost all of that online. And that was, that was what we were doing at the time. And then obviously when COVID happened, we had kind of a bit of a head start, right? Because everybody was forced to go online, but our business was already online.
That's true. Yeah. And then you got into meditation and everything, and so it sounds like you're doing meditation now, and you're doing the communication, the leadership training, and nutritionist is, so how do they all play out? I mean, how do you intertwine all these together, with
Yeah.
what you're teaching people?
That's a really good question. I haven't thought about that before. I would say that the through line, if you will, right, the kind of thing that holds them all together
Mhm.
is the emphasis on transformation, personal transformation, and a very strong belief. After going through what I've gone through, I know that, anything is possible for people when they alter, the view at which they're looking through the world through, and then how the world shows up when you alter that kind of the view. And that works whether it's nutrition, you're trying to lose weight, you're trying to get fit, you're trying to do these different things. And with communication and leadership, it's the same thing, right? Often we have a default by which we communicate, and it's usually a survival mechanism, right? Almost all of our communication and our leadership styles are built on a kind of model of survival that we learned, to get through life to whatever point we're at now. But I understand, after doing a lot of the deeper work and the meditation and stuff, that there is actually another way to do all of those things from a more kind of aware place. And so that's what I'm really passionate about. It's what's underneath of it all, is that human beings live their best life, really, and that, get to the source of whatever the barriers are that all of us have, and essentially remove them, whether it's using body work or meditation or, different things. There's a lot of different paths. But freedom and liberation from, our own constraints is really my biggest passion. And all of the things that I do incorporate that in some way as a fundamental principle.
Yeah. And so you're teaching this with the corporations and stuff and businesses is.
So the coaching and stuff that we do is personal, right?
Okay.
Sometimes it's in a group setting. And then some of the people that I work with are, let's say high positions in corporations and things like that, but I don't do corporate wellness.
I just misunderstood you from before, because you said you were helping that landmark, I think you mentioned. So that's how I took it.
Okay. Yeah. That's actually not paid. I mean, that's kind of a volunteer thing that I use their technology
Hmm.
to have a personal transformation, and then kind of kept going in their programs, and then ended up coaching on their programs. And so that's something that I just basically engage with, because it made a huge difference for me and still does. So they are a company, but I
Hmm.
don't work for them.
For them, right? Or okay, okay. So I'm gonna go into this a little bit more, because meditation, right? So
Mhm.
I'll be honest with you. I do it every morning. I wouldn't say I'm that deep yet. It
Mhm.
probably lasts about 10 minutes. Um, what would you say would be the best way to meditate? And is there a certain time, a length, out of your experience?
This is it's such a deep topic, and if you asked, 100 people who do this regularly, you probably get 100 different answers, because there's so many different styles of meditation.
Hmm.
I got into Vipassana, which is kind of a body scan style of meditation, because I went and did a 10-day course with it's called a Vipassana, right? So it's a 10-day silent meditation. You go, and there's no speaking, there's no writing, there's no, you can't listen to anything, you can't read anything, you can't even look people in the eye. Like, that's the process. And that's one of the things that kind of cracked me open. The being in that silence after, it was like 3 or 4 days, unbelievably challenging. A lot of stuff that was repressed from my childhood and things that I had never even thought about before, and probably were at the source of my drinking, by the way. Unresolved things are often that we can't see, often drive our behavior. So I fell in love with that modality of meditation just, by proximity. I'm a big believer that any style, whether it's, mindfulness meditation or vipassana, or, there's so many different types of meditation. Time of the day, I think there is a lot of, if you just from a scientific standpoint, is early in the morning as you can as possible is generally the most effective if you're looking for equanimity, meaning kind of peace of mind, prior to the phone going off, prior to being on, the devices, prior to even people talking to you, these different things, right? So prior to all those things happening, if you can engage in the meditation, that it's going to be the most effective at those times. In India, a lot of people start their days at 4 o'clock in the morning, and the first thing that they do is prayer or meditation. And there's a lot of science that shows, if you're able to do, that kind of 4 or 5 o'clock hour, that's the best. It's not me. I generally wake up about 6:30 and I do Wim Hof breath work to kind of activate my nervous system. And then right after that, there's usually like a peaceful period, and I will do the meditation right after that.
Interesting. Yeah, so I wake up at 4. So
Wow.
I try to do it, it's somewhere probably between 4:30 and 5, I'll probably start doing something like that. But for me, it's mostly like motivation stuff, and then I'll meditate after that. But it's, I mean, what would you say to somebody that is, I mean, how far in do you have to go to say, yeah, it opens up your mind? You know what I mean? Like, because sometimes what I'm trying to get at is sometimes I do it, right? And I feel like my thoughts are just still going nuts, right? You
Right.
can't block them out, right? And I know you're supposed to try to, oh, it's a thought and let it go. And oh, it's another, and let it go, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes they're hard, and we're trying to erase the day prior to us, right? So we're not thinking the same thing over and over, which causes stress and anxiety and
Right.
depression and everything else. Um, but yeah, do you have an answer for that?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that meditation it's supposed to be done some particular way. And I think that people get hung up on that. I've been doing meditation for a long time, and usually the first 10, 15 minutes there's a lot of turbulence going on internally. Um, so I think in terms of length of time, it's a practice, just like anything else. So the key is to not resist whatever's happening that's really the key. Whether you're in the park and, kids are screaming and like that, if you can find a place in your mind where you can just not resist what's going on and just kind of be with what's arising in the moment, that's a
Mhm.
meditation. So anytime you have that kind of practice where a stimulus is happening and you're not responding to that stimulus or reacting to that stimulus in any way, that to me is like a meditative type of thing. And the best way to prepare for those moments in life is to do it quietly sitting on a pillow, right?
Mhm.
um, but that would be my recommendation is, first of all, don't think that somehow meditation is somehow you're supposed to empty your mind and, just have like total peace. Those things will happen from time to time, but it's not what happens most of the time. And there is no good or bad meditation, right? There's just what happens. So if you do a 15-20 minute meditation and the whole time you're like reacting and your thoughts are all over the place, it's not bad. You know what I mean? That's part of the thing, is like not judging yourself for whatever's happening, right? So that's why a lot of times when you have a meditation teacher, they'll teach you like, just notice when your mind wanders. Don't resist it or make it wrong that it's doing that. Just gently bring it back to your breath or whatever that you're doing.
Mhm.
So that's really the key.
Yeah. I So what would you say to somebody that doesn't think it works and not a believer in something, doing something like this?
Yeah. I think anybody that says that it doesn't work is just is not aware of what they're reacting to, right? There's no, that's like saying gravity doesn't exist,
Hmm.
right? We just know scientifically that it does. Meditation works. Now, that doesn't mean that it's easy, and it doesn't mean that it's gonna work the first time you do it, or the first 10 times you do it. It may take quite a long time in order to get to the point where, let's say, you're proficient at it. But it's like saying, oh, going to the gym doesn't work. No, going to the gym works. You just don't like it, and it's taking longer than you than you think it
Yeah.
should, or something like that. But even if you're not feeling, let's say, the benefits right away, because sometimes it actually makes people more anxious, or it can induce stress because they've never actually sat quietly. So I would say just keep doing it, because it does work, and just consider that whatever challenges are coming up during the meditation, that's what is meant to come up, because that's what's going on under the surface. So just keep being with it until it releases, and then you'll have a good experience.
I like it. This is good stuff. Um, yeah. So you do communication and leadership too, and you put that all in like a package, or you just do like a one-on-one with somebody that just wants meditation, or how does your program work?
It's not really meditation in terms of the coaching. Like, that's a modality that we'll bring in nutrition.
Hmm.
But like communication and the leadership side of things, a lot of it actually has the same principles as what I just explained in meditation. Like communication, we're almost always, as human beings, in a stimulus response type of experience, such that what we're saying is a reaction to something that's happening. So communication, not in the sense of like tips and tricks and strategies and you know what I mean, like that, but more being aware that your communication is coming from some place that you're not conscious of, and being able to figure out how to release those things, become aware of them, and having a practice where you're practicing listening, and that's kind of the essence. And when it comes to leadership, again, your leadership, your communication, who you're being with people, is generally a reaction to things that are happening. And a lot of times things that have happened to us when we're younger in our lives. And the more that you can bring awareness to those things, and be able to bring them into the light, if you will, out of a blind spot, the more that you can kind of let them go, and it will allow you to have a natural self-expression that's much more, let's say, bold, but also compassionate. And it gives you a higher level of awareness when you're working with people. And so that's really the focus. It's not like going to a leadership training in an academic institution where you're going to learn the different leadership styles or strategies that different people have had, or read a textbook on what the definition of leadership is. It's really a process of self-discovery.
So it's more of responding instead of reacting with people. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
responding. That's a good distinction.
yeah, and then you're trying to be. So I'm trying to share this out of experience too, because I feel like I tend to listen to more people that rather than to quickly react,
Mm-hmm.
and to understand them a little bit more first, right? And even when there's other people to saying something bad about somebody else or whatever, well, for me, I want to understand why they're thinking like that first, and
Right.
even though you might not know what something happening with them outside of work or wherever it's at, right? You might never figure that part out.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, there could be anything, right? But
Mm-hmm.
you have to put them in that place. You have to, you can't bring everything here. It's leave that somewhere else. This is what's important, and focus on what we're doing and work together as a team. That's how I'm reading what you're sharing with me. If that's incorrect, then feel free to correct me.
No, that's really great what you said. I mean, just the act of finding out what people actually mean versus what you're hearing them saying is transformative, right? Because generally what we do is people say things. It goes through a filter in our, in our mind. You can call it that if you want, but we hear whatever we hear. It's it's almost never what the person's actually saying. But then we take actions on and we respond to what we think people are saying. But what you just said is beautiful, because if you actually check in with people and say, hey, listen, before I give you my opinion, right, let me see if I'm understanding what you're saying. We almost never get what people are actually saying, right? And just the practice of, like you called that, listening and finding out what's actually going on with people. You're going to find out that whatever you were going to say or whatever that you were going to do in response, it's probably way off base. And the more that you do that, the more you realize you barely have any idea why you are thinking what you're thinking and doing what you're doing, not to mention trying to understand why other people are saying what they're saying and doing what they're doing. So this act is this practice of just inquiring, right? What you do in your podcasts, right? Asking questions. Can you say more about that? Let me see if I understand what you're saying. All these things that you've been doing, that is transformative, because when people feel like you're listening to them in life, it transforms communication between those people forever.
Thank you. And yeah, and I feel like a lot of people take things personally. So you agree with that one, so that's one you have to watch out for. So, and all, you got to bring the people back down to that level sometimes, wherever they're taking things, and like, no, somebody was not trying to send a message to you personally. It's they have problems going on in their life too.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you got to figure that stuff out. But Nathan, I appreciate you sharing everything with us. How does somebody reach out? First of all, do you help clients just in person or virtually?
I do. Yeah. I work with a handful of people one-on-one. We run a group program called the Body Love program with my wife is also a sports nutritionist, yoga instructor. She does a lot of breath work, and so does her sister. So we have a kind of a small team of coaches, and we run a group program that's designed with kind of just a holistic approach to wellness. And then I work with people one-on-one that are a little bit more serious about either having a breakthrough in a particular area of their life, whether it's business or fitness or relationships or whatever. And then anybody that is kind of dealing with addiction, and then also it's a multi-headed hydra, right? Like, a lot of times people think of addiction as like the guy under the bridge drinking out of a paper bag, but that's not most people's experience. They have a behavior that they engage in. They know that it doesn't bring them results, the feelings and the experience that they want, but they keep doing it. And they don't know why they keep doing, because they don't want to be doing it. To me, addiction is a spectrum, and almost everybody's on it in some way. So anybody that wants to break free from those kind of internal constraints, barriers, things like that, I'm happy to work with them.
That's awesome. And so how does somebody connect with you?
On Instagram, Rising Phoenix Wellness. So the name of my personal brand is Rising Phoenix Wellness. That's probably the best way. It's also my name, Nathan McCullough, on Instagram. That's the social media, as long as my Facebook is the same. Facebook, Instagram are the two places that I look when I do look at social media. I post every day. But yeah, social media is probably the best place to do that. Even my WhatsApp, like my direct phone number, is on my Instagram. So if people want to message me directly, I'm an open book.
And so what kind of stuff are you posting then on Instagram?
Mostly about health and wellness, communication strategies, leadership. I'm a big reader. So posting about the audiobooks that I listen to or the books that I read. I'm still a philosophy nut, so a lot of it is kind of like communication, leadership, and wellness infused with this personal development approach, really focused on transformation. Like that's the main themes in almost everything that I'm doing. So I'll do a mixture of those topics, plus also like books that I read. I'll give kind of my key takeaways and things like that. It's kind of a way for me to, it's a place where I can explore my own ideas and then engage with other people.
It's cool. Yeah. And and share everything that you're going through. And
Yep.
yeah, that's awesome. So I have one question to ask you then.
Okay.
Uh, what are 3 key things you've learned and used along your journey?
3 key things. So nutrition is critical, especially in the world that we're living in, where almost everything is processed and you don't know where it comes from, and it's full of stuff that you wouldn't feed someone else. Nutrition is critical. That's one of the key things. Meditation in its multi layers, so just mindfulness practices or any kind of spiritual practice, is absolutely essential for me. And just learning, having an empty cup mind kind of mentality, and not being right about anything, but kind of approaching your own life and the world through that lens of, you can learn something from anybody in any circumstance. You can learn something from today. There's always something that you can take away. So I think focus on your nutrition, focus on your mindfulness, and have this kind of open-minded approach to life. And those are kind of my key principles that I live by my life by, and they seem to work for me.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like the last one because I feel like I've been open-minded for a couple of years now, and it just meeting people like yourself, it's just been a ride. You know what I mean? It's just been amazing. So Nathan, thank you for coming on, sharing your journey and everything else with the guests, the listeners, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. I acknowledge you for what you're doing. Having conversations with people matters. People matter. And I really acknowledge you for the motivation behind, what you're doing, and just having conversations and dialogue is critical. So thanks for being someone who's bringing authentic communication to the planet, man. It makes a difference.
You're welcome.